Hey everyone, it's Allie and welcome to my channel. So today we're going to be talking about all of the reads that I gave 5 stars in 2022. Now, I originally set a 100 book goal for myself for 2022 and I did not meet it. I read 83 books and at first I was like,
Allie, you should have done better than that.
But then when I look back, I saw that I had only read 31 books, which I shouldn't even say only. Reading 31 books in a year is fantastic, but I read 83 books the year after I read 31. So I am very, very happy with that. I read a lot of great books. I rated so many books 4 stars or somewhere between 4 and 5 stars, so I would call that a win. So I guess before I get into my 5 stars, I'll quickly explain how I personally rate books. I truly don't really ever rate anything under 3 stars, and if I were to rate something under 3 stars, I probably wouldn't finish it. But if I read something that I don't really like the writing that much, I don't think it's that great, and I don't really like the story that much, but I could see how other people could like it, I give that a 3. So that to me is like, it just wasn't for me. A 4 star on the other hand is either the story was really good, I like the genre, but the writing, maybe it wasn't up to par or vice versa. That is usually a 4, more like a 4.5 to like a 4.8 for me personally. It was almost 5 stars, the writing was pretty good, the story was pretty good, but one of them was lacking a little bit. It just wasn't 5-star material. And then 5 stars, of course, are the best of the best. I really, really enjoyed them. I thought the writing was great. I thought the story was great. It's something that I will be thinking about for a while. And so I did end up reading 26 5-star books, which was higher than I thought. I was thinking it was going to be maybe right around 20, but 26, and then when I did pull all of these out again to talk about, I, just felt a little happy just seeing them again. These are the stories that I will keep for a long, long time. Okay, so I'll talk about these in no particular order, and I think I am missing maybe 2 or 3, so I'll have to remember to figure out which ones those are as I'm filming this. But yes, this is not the order that I read them in. This is not, my least favorite to favorite, anything like that. I will try to identify maybe my top 5 out of 25 at the end. It'll be tough, but I'll do my best. Okay, so first up, we've got Gillian Flynn's Sharp Objects, and I just love Gillian Flynn. I read a lot of thrillers this year. I am a thriller girly now. I mean, I always really did like them, but I found myself always reaching for them on my to-be-read shelf, and I even have some now that I'm holding off for different challenges or whatever throughout the next few months, and I just want to read them now. I don't want to wait. And so if you also like thrillers, I am sure you have read all of Gillian Flynn's books because she doesn't have very many. And this was her debut novel, and it is the last one that I'm reading. And I will say it is my least favorite out of the books that Gillian Flynn has written. I felt like the other 2 were just very, very different than anything that I had read. And this, I have kind of seen this theme before, but it is written perfectly. That's why I love Gillian Flynn so much. She'll probably always be one of my favorite authors because she is a dang good writer and she also tells a dang good story. So in case you're unfamiliar with this story, of course, this isn't the whole thing because there's going to be many twists and turns, but it says, fresh from a brief stay at a psych hospital, reporter Camille Preaker faces a troubling assignment. She must return to her tiny hometown to cover the murders of 2 preteen girls. For years, Camille has hardly spoken to her neurotic, hypochondriac mother or to the half-sister she barely knows, a beautiful 13-year-old with an eerie grip on the town. Now installed in her old bedroom in her family's Victorian mansion, Camille finds herself identifying with the young victims a bit too strongly. Dogged by her own demons, she must unravel the psychological puzzle of her own past if she wants to get the story and survive this homecoming. So I didn't see the ending coming. I thought it was kind of predictable throughout the whole thing, but then thankfully there was a twist that I didn't see. But just overall, like I said, not my favorite of Gillian Flynn's, my least favorite, but still 5 stars. The chick can write. All right, this was actually my last read of 2022. This is Kate Atkinson's Behind the Scenes at the Museum, and I just don't even know how to describe Kate Atkinson sometimes. Her writing is all over the place, like it jumps in time, so she'll tell you that somebody died very early on, and then maybe much later, 100 pages later, is when you find out how they died. Like, you really have to pay attention in these books. They are all pretty much historical fiction, which is my favorite genre, and you will see that reflected in this 5-star stack. But I love this story because it follows multiple generations, which I really, really, really love. If you haven't read this and you want to, I would genuinely recommend making a family tree as you are introduced to characters, because that did get me tripped up a little bit. It took me a while to remember how people were related to each other because it does jump around in time, but I just absolutely love Kate Atkinson's writing style. I think she just writes a fantastic story. And this was actually her debut novel, and I just think it is really, really great. All right, so this is one that technically hasn't come out yet at the beginning of January 2023. So this is Stacey Willingham's All the Dangerous Things, which is her second thriller. Her first book was called A Flicker in the Dark, and I think that just came out last year. And I really, really liked that one. I also read it last year, and I think I gave it probably 4.5 stars. I did like this one better. I think the writing was cleaned up just a little bit. I did like the story of this one a bit better too, but I would highly recommend reading both of her books. And the way that I was able to read this early is because I did start getting Book of the Month at the end of last year, and so I got this in December. And if you haven't gotten Book of the Month yet, treat yourself this year. Get that book mail once a month. You can get some early novels, which is pretty cool. And if you haven't signed up before, you can use my link down in the description. So this book was a story that I have heard in some way a few times before, but it definitely kept me very interested, and I did like the twist a lot. So the main character, Isabel Drake's son, was taken a year before the novel begins, and so she's trying to find him, of course, and there's a little added element of her getting blackouts. She's had blackouts since she was young, and you also find out some of her past trauma as you are reading through the story. So even though I've read other thrillers with similar storylines before, this is definitely the best of that whole "my kid's been kidnapped, let me try to find them" storyline. And look at that cover, just really, really pretty. So of course I would recommend this. I should probably not say that every single time, right? Obviously I recommend them. All right guys, I will pick up the pace. I know I'm talking too much and too slow. So here's a threefer. I read the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy, and they all got 5 stars from me. I was really, really impressed with this trilogy. It's a young adult trilogy, but I think it was really great. I really liked the story. So the first book begins with our main character, Pip, who is very much like a Nancy Drew kind of chick, and she is investigating a cold case that happened in her town. And so she becomes little detective. She makes a podcast along the way. She has a great sidekick that you meet. And then as the series continues, more cases arise, and I was really impressed with the character development of the main character, Pip, in the stories, and the fact that it wasn't just like her solving a mystery, her solving a mystery, her solving a mystery. Like, it really was kind of one long continuous story. So I would really recommend these, especially if you have like a middle school student or high school student. I think that this would be a great series for them. Okay, I'll lump these two together, not because they are similar, but just because they are by the same author. I'm very impressed with these. So this is Anthony Doerr, I think is how you say his name. And he wrote All the Light We Cannot See, which I've gotten paperback. And then I absolutely loved that. So I picked up Cloud Cuckoo Land, which came out last year. I got this very soon after it did come out. So this one is a World War II novel. I read a lot of World War II novels because I read a lot of historical fiction, but I think that this is a really great option if you're looking for a book set during that time. And I'll just read the back really quickly so you can get an idea. So Marie lives with her father in Paris near the Museum of Natural History where he works. When she is 12, the Nazis occupy Paris and father and daughter flee to the walled citadel of Saint Malo, where Marie's reclusive great-uncle lives in a tall house by the sea. With them they carry what might be the museum's most valuable and dangerous jewel. In mining town in Germany, Werner, an orphan, grows up with his younger sister, enchanted by a crude radio they found that brings them news and stories from places they have never seen or imagined. Werner becomes an expert at building and fixing these crucial new instruments and is enlisted to use his talent to track down the resistance. And then Marie and Werner, they're having these separate stories, and then they do come together in some way. So I would absolutely recommend this book. I think it was a really unique story set during the World War II time, which is of course written about a ton, written beautifully. As I said, I could not even wait to get my hands on this book. So Cloud Cuckoo Land is completely different. You know, it's not another World War II novel or anything like that, but again, written so well. And this one, I would say I liked slightly less than All the Light We Cannot See, but that's just because I do really like reading about the World War II time. Both of them are fantastic. I could absolutely see a lot of people preferring Cloud Cuckoo Land actually over All the Light We Cannot See. So this one is also, I think, technically a historical fiction novel. It's set in 3 completely different times. So we've got Constantinople in the 15th century, and then 500 years later in Idaho, and then in the far future. So very, very cool. I will say it took me a little bit to get into this because especially like the futuristic world was kind of confusing to me at first. I'm not really a sci-fi girly at all, but stick with that one. It'll take you a little bit to read, but amazing. Another historical fiction. I think I rated almost every historical fiction book I read last year 5 stars. For me, it is absolutely one of my favorite genres. But this one, I think a lot of people would like. It is called The Gown. So this is set in both London in 1947 and also Toronto in 2016, which I think is, you know, like when this book was written, it's supposed to be present time. But I thought that this was such a unique story because it's set like right around that World War II time, but it has nothing to do with like the war or anything like that. It's not like a soldier story. It follows a woman and she ends up contributing to Queen Elizabeth's wedding dress. So pretty cool and interesting story. And then the person in 2016 is her relative, and the relative is kind of trying to find out more information about the woman in 1947. So really, really did like the story a lot. Wasn't really expecting 5 stars when I first started it. And this was one I just picked up at the thrift store and I ended up loving it. So would highly recommend, of course, taking a chance on books when you can get them for cheap. This one I really, really loved. This is Mitch Albom's, who wrote Tuesdays with Morrie. This is The Magic Strings of Frankie Presto, and I just think this was such a fun story. It was very kind of like Forrest Gump feel, as in there's this made-up character, but he's going throughout time and he's meeting real people in time, mostly musicians. So I know he meets like Hank Williams. I'm pretty sure he met Elvis. This was one I read quite a while ago, but I just really, really liked it. Of course, Mitch Albom is a really popular author, and this is personally my favorite book of his that I have read. I preferred it over Tuesdays with Morrie. I just really loved the story, and he proves 100% that he can write some dang good fiction. I love this story too because it's set in reality, but there's a magical element to it, and it's just a really fun, heartwarming book. And if you haven't read this one yet, I would really, really recommend putting it on your to-be read list. So these two I'll put together. They are 2 more Kate Atkinson books. This one is Life After Life, and this one is A God in Ruins. And I don't think they're necessarily considered a duology, but this book has the same characters as this one. And again, Kate Atkinson, she just writes in such an interesting way. So it sounds depressing, but I promise it's really good. Basically, the main character just dies in all these different ways. And you know that she's died and another life has begun when it goes back to her birth. And so that got a little bit annoying because I felt like there were maybe a few too many different situations, but it was just such an interesting book. I thought it was so cool. Great characters. I mean, Kate Atkinson can write. She's one of my favorites for a reason. But if you're looking for a very unique story, a very uniquely written story, pick this one up. And this does span quite a bit of time, but a good portion of it does take place in like the 1930s and 40s. So again, that World War II time. And then there was a really likable character in this story, the brother Teddy. And I think maybe so many people like this character that she wrote this book, or maybe she had always planned on it, I'm not sure. But he is the main character of this story. So if you like A Life After Life, I would highly recommend reading A God in Ruins. This is a fun cover. This is Richard Osman's The Man Who Died Twice. This is actually the second book in the Thursday Murder Club Mysteries. I read the first book, of course, but I didn't give that one 5 stars. I think I either gave it 4.5 or like a 4.8. It definitely was very close. I enjoyed it very much. But I found like the actual crime a little bit lacking, but the characters in this series are what make it worth it. So if you're only looking for like a good crime story, a good mystery, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this series. over other ones. But Richard Osman has just such a great UK kind of humor that I really love. I think he actually is a comedian and that very much comes through. And the characters are fantastic because the Thursday Murder Club is a group of elderly people and they have great personalities and they get together once a week on Thursdays to try to solve crimes. And it's just really fun. It's really different. So if you're looking for just a good story, good characters, definitely read this series. I did personally like the second one more than the first one, but I think you should read them in order, and I think you'll probably like them all. There is another one out, the third one is out, and I think the fourth one is actually coming out in 2023. I wouldn't say I'm dying to read the third one, not enough to pay the full price hardback, I don't think, but I definitely will finish the series. All right, guys, let's take a little break, a little stretch break. Ooh. Another historical fiction book, The Women of Chateau, Lafayette. Holy smokes, guys. I think this took me like at least a week and a half to read. It's a pretty thick one, but it's just a very dense story. There's a lot of information in it, but I just think it's so good. I really, really loved it. It follows 3 different women connected to Lafayette, the famous Frenchman who came to America and helped in the Revolution. And it was really fascinating to me because I didn't really know that much about Lafayette at all. And 2 of the women in this book are based on their real counterparts. So there is Lafayette's wife, Adrienne, and so that time period is 1774. And then there's also another woman who really lived named Beatrice Chandler in 1914 and how she was connected to Lafayette. And then also in 1940, there's a woman named Martha Simone, and that was not a real person, but she is based off of somebody else. So it's really cool to know that all of these events were really happening. And this is just a really, really fantastically told story of these 3 different women and how they made such a difference in the lives of others when they lived. And just the fact that they were all connected to Lafayette and his home is really, really cool. So yeah, this one will probably not be a quick read for you. It'll take some brain power, but I would highly, highly recommend. Okay, let's switch it up since so many of these are historical fiction. But this is Claire McIntosh's The Last Party, and I thought that this story was so fun and so unique. The back just says, it's the party to end all parties, but not everyone is here to celebrate. So this one, I can't remember exactly. I think it's set in like Scotland or Wales or somewhere like there. So a very unique, picturesque setting to me in America, in Ohio. The characters are also really good. The story's well told. Somebody dies at a party and they're trying to figure out who killed him, of course, but of course there's like a lot of secrets in the village as a whole. The main character, the detective on the case, has secrets of her own. Really, really love this one. This one's actually a reread, but I hadn't read it in a long time, and it was one of my favorites when I originally read it, and I can confirm that it is still a favorite. This is Ian McEwan's Atonement. I don't love all of his books, although I think he is a fantastic writer, very skilled. He writes a lot of very sexual stories, which I'm not really into that much as a whole. I've read a lot of his books more because of his writing style rather than the actual story, but I do love the story of Atonement. I think the main character of Bryony is really interesting to see her character development. This is a story of one girl making a decision, saying something about somebody, and how that affected her and the other people involved throughout their entire lives. And it's very sad, as I said, if you don't know the story, but it's a dang good one, and I think the movie is fantastic as well with Keira Knightley and James McAvoy. Highly recommend if you haven't seen it. Definitely one of the best book to movie adaptations that I've seen personally. So if this one has been on your list to read for years and years and years, 2023 is the year to read it. All right, this one was definitely one of my favorites, and I need to read more by this author, Kate Forsyth, because she writes stories that are based on the classic fairy tales, and those are some of my absolute favorite fantasy stories, and I know she's written quite a bit of them. She's been around for a while. This one is actually more of a historical fiction though, because it is based on not necessarily the Brothers Grimm. They're very main characters in the story, but the main character is the Wild Girl, who is closely connected to the Grimm brothers. And it was really, really interesting to just read about that environment, read about the setting, because I feel like when you think of the Brothers Grimm, you think of maybe older men that are like very intellectual, and that is absolutely not how they got their start at all. So it was very interesting to read from the girl's perspective. Can't even remember her name. This was like the first book I read. Dorchen. To read from Dorchen's perspective what living close to the Brothers Grimm was like, how they collected their stories, what was going on at the time. I can easily say that this is one of my favorite historical fiction books of all time, and I have read a lot of them. This one I picked up on a whim as well. This was on like super clearance at Half Price Books. This is actually technically a middle grade book. It is called Echo. This is by the author Pam Ryan, and she's written a lot of other middle grade books. I think I actually read a couple of hers in school. She writes really magical, beautifully written stories, and after I finished reading this, when I was looking at other Goodreads reviews, I saw a couple people say that the audiobook is just absolutely beautiful. There are some musical aspects to this story, so I can imagine that it sounds really wonderful on an audiobook. So I probably will reread it by listening to the audiobook in the future. I think that'd be worth it. But it's about this kind of magical harmonica and how it is connected to different people in different times. And then it does all come together at the end. And I just really, really enjoyed it. Sweet read. It is pretty thick looking, but the words on the pages are pretty spread out. Next up, we've got 2 Taylor Jenkins Reid stories. I did also read Daisy Jones and the Six. That one didn't get 5 stars from me. I did really enjoy that one as well. I think I gave it either a 4.5 or 4.8. Taylor Jenkins Reid is absolutely now an auto-buy author from me. She's a fantastic writer, and I just really enjoy her stories. They're all so different, but then she has her connections amongst the very popular 4 books that she wrote, which includes The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Malibu Rising, Daisy Jones and the Six, and then Carrie Soto, which I haven't read yet. And then TJR does have some other books that she wrote before these that I am going to be reading later this year, and I'm sure they are fantastic as well. But these 2 I did think were great enough to give 5 stars. For me, Daisy Jones was written in a very atypical way, which you'll know if you did read that one. And I just didn't really like that much. Like, I think it worked. I totally understand why she did it. It just made it like a little less than perfect for me. And I didn't like that story as well overall either, but highly recommend that one. Of these 2, I don't know. I'm not sure that I could say which one I really like better. The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, if you haven't heard of it by now, follows Evelyn Hugo as she's telling you about her life and all of her different husbands. So I do love this one a lot because I just love stories that follow a person's life. So maybe I like this one slightly more than Malibu Rising, but this one was fantastic as well. Loved the characters in it. This one follows the children of a famous singer and their party, which gets out of control and all the things that happen. But there's a little bit of mystery involved in this one. There's some jumping back and forth. So I would absolutely, absolutely recommend. I read this and then also The 7 Husbands very, very quickly, basically like a one sitting read for me for both. Here we have Piranesi, which is probably the most unique story. This one, like, if you have not read it or if you tried to read it and you put it down, one, I get you. I literally almost did that. Like I said earlier, like, I hardly ever don't finish books, but this one I really almost put down just because I could not understand what the heck was going on. But that is kind of the whole point with the story. There's probably a good 75-ish pages that you're like, what? And then just gradually it starts to make more sense and it's totally worth it. It's so interesting. I can't even say more than that. It's just such a good book, such a fascinating story. Put this one on your list if you haven't read it. Okay, sorry for this abrupt change. It's actually been a few days. My memory card filled up when I was recording this video, and then I forgot to finish filming it, so here I am. We just have a few left, and this one is absolutely going to be in my top 10. Make sure you stay tuned for that at the end. So this is Stephen King's Fairy Tale, and this is the first book that I have ever read by Stephen King. I am not a big horror fan. I love a good thriller, but horror definitely just freaks me out. And so because of that, he really wasn't even on my radar. But when I saw that this is more of a dark fantasy, I decided to give it a try. And I'm so glad I did because I loved this book. It's definitely dark. There's violence, there's foul language, there's all of that. So I would not recommend it for a younger audience or for you if you don't like gore. Not that I like gore, but you know, if you're like really turned off by that, this would not be for you. But the writing is superb. I mean, he is a best-selling author for a reason. So the first like 100 to 150 to maybe even like 200 pages, you don't even enter the fantasy world. It's just following our main character. So his name is Charlie Reed. He's a high school kid. He's kind of just like a typical kid. And then he encounters this like crotchety old man, and he helps him with a health emergency, and then he helps him with his house. And this man is hiding a secret, and the boy Charlie figures it out, goes exploring. There is a whole other world element to it. So I just really, really, really love this overall. It is a thick one. I think it's close to 700 pages, or I guess it's more like 600 pages, but I flew through this. I think I read it in a day and a half, and more than pretty much any other book I read last year, I just so wanted to keep reading and wanting to know what happened next. So I'm glad I gave this a try, and I'm for sure gonna read more Stephen King in the future. I'll probably just Google his least scary books. Here we have another historical fiction book. This is Diane Chamberlain's Necessary Lies, and this is set in 1960 in North Carolina. It says the lives of Ivy Hart and Jane Forrester couldn't be more different. 15-year-old Ivy lives with her family as tenants on a small tobacco farm, but when her parents die, Ivy is left to care for her grandmother, older sister, and nephew. As she struggles with her grandmother's aging, her sister's mental illness, and her own epilepsy, she realizes they might need more than she can give. When Jane Forrester takes a position as Grace County's newest social worker, she's given the task of recommending which of her clients should be sterilized without their knowledge or consent. And I won't go on and read all of it, but Jane ends up working with Ivy's family, and it was just so interesting and honestly horrifying to read about the sterilizations that were going on in the 60s. I honestly did not know much about that at all, how people were being sterilized, if they were deemed to have too low of an IQ or if they had different disabilities, and just how the IQs were so off based on whether you lived in a rural environment or a city environment. So it was just so fascinating, but like I said, horrifying to read about what was going on not that long ago at all. And I haven't read hardly any historical fiction books set during the 60s. So I will be on the lookout for more historical fiction books set during that time period. And I'm definitely going to be on the lookout for more of Diane Chamberlain's books. I think she's written quite a few. Yeah, she's written probably like 20 or so. So I'll probably just like look for her when I'm at thrift stores or half-price books, places like that, and these will be nice filler books for in-between challenges. This is likely the most surprising 5-star of the whole dang bunch because I totally just picked this up at Goodwill. Didn't have a clue what it was about. I think I was just like, yeah, I like the cover for $1. I'll pick it up and see how it goes. And I don't think everyone would think that this is a 5-star book, but it just hit everything that I really love. So it starts out in 1929, and it's kind of like a sisterhood of the traveling pants moment. There's these 4 best friends who are all very different, and they're getting together and they're writing their dreams and putting them in a bottle. And of course, it's like right before the Depression hits, so quickly the girls kind of forget everything about what they have just said and are now focusing on just surviving. And of course, as life goes, they kind of go their own separate ways. And I just love how this book was written because you find out each girl's story. It kind of goes one after the other. And then at the end, some may come together, some may not. I don't want to spoil too much, but I just loved every aspect of this book. I love stories that follow a person's whole life. And it was just so interesting to read how they all live such different lives. And of course, none of them went exactly how they expected, and the dreams that they wrote in their bottles didn't necessarily come true. And there's just a very nice theme of friendship and faith. And I keep meaning to look up more from her, from Penelope J. Stokes. So it says author of Circle of Grace. So maybe I'll just go try and find that at Half Price Books or somewhere like that. So surprising. This wasn't written very recently, but I absolutely loved it. Yeah, this is is from 1999. All right, and then just a few that I don't have the physical copies. So first up, I have Anxious People, and I love this book. I think it is my favorite of Frederick Bachman's. I did read his Big Fat Honkin' The Winners, which is the third book in the Beartown trilogy. I did read that in December, and I really, really like that a lot. I do enjoy that trilogy, but it just wasn't quite 5 stars from me. And I've read A Man Called Ove and a few other ones, and I do like them all. I would highly recommend looking up anything by Frederick Bachman. I would for sure say he is an auto-buy author from me, even though I still need to read a few of his older ones. But Anxious People is about a group of people who are stuck together in kind of like a botched robbery, and you're finding out more about them throughout the book, and you're also finding out about the robber, and it just is a really well-told story. There's some good humor in it, it's engaging. Again, it's kind of come up a few times throughout this video, but I just like to hear stories about people's past, so it's a lot of discovering information about each person throughout the book. So I absolutely would recommend that one. I actually got that on Book Outlet, so I'd look there first because you can get books for just a few dollars, and if you've never shopped there before, definitely check out my code down below. There's quite a few of these books that I did end up getting from Book Outlet. And then another one that I gave 5 stars that I don't have with me, my mom's actually reading it right now, another Kate Atkinson. It's called When Will There Be Good News? And I think I just got this at the thrift store. I think that's where my love for Kate Atkinson began last year. And I didn't actually realize this. It didn't matter in the understanding of the story, but that is actually the 3rd book in a series about a detective called Jackson Brodie. So if you were hearing me talk about Kate Atkinson and you're not that interested in historical fiction, the Jackson Brodie series could be really good for you. Yeah, in my review, I said, love the story, characters, twists, and overall writing style. I can't really remember all of the details that well because that was one of the first books I read this year, but I do recall how much I absolutely love the characters in that one. And I did end up buying pretty much the whole rest of that series on Book Outlet, and those are on my list to read just here and there throughout the year. Okay, so now that we've gone through all of the books that I gave 5 stars, I'm gonna try to identify my top 10. I don't think I'll be able to say like my top 1, but I'll pull out the top 10 and just show you real quick. Okay, so this was genuinely difficult, but I would say my top 10 of the year are Cloud Cuckoo Land, All the Light We Cannot See. So both of those Anthony Doerr books made it to the top 10. Life After Life, The Wild Girl, 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Magic Strings of Frankie Presto, The Woman of Chateau Lafayette, Piranesi, The Blue Bottle Club, most surprising for sure, and then Fairy Tale. If you made it through the whole video, thank you so much, and if you did enjoy it, please make sure to give me a big thumbs up and subscribe. Really helps my channel out a lot. I have so many videos planned for this year, so I do hope you stick around. Thank you guys so much again for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.